The silence you hear is the Minnesota Vikings on the first day of free agency. Let's get into the vibe. Welcome to the Vibe of the Vikings, where we catch the real feel for Minnesota Vikings football. Joining you here late on Monday night after the first day of free agency. And well, for the Minnesota Vikings, it was not so eventful. They make one out of the house signing that we'll talk about. I like it. But other than that, a pretty quiet day. Although we should mention first that they did make a move before free agency started. Let's just quickly recap, because it's been a while since we've been here. Let's talk about some of the things that the Minnesota Vikings have done before, leading up to free agency, in order to get under the cap. Because when we last left you, they were at about $40+ million over the cap. So of the things that they were going to do, one is that Ryan Kelly retired. So I believe that saves about $6 million. Aaron Jones, Javon Hargrave, and Jonathan Allen are all set to be released. So that, I think, in total, that's about $25 million off the books between those three players. Javon Hargrave, I was for. Jonathan Allen, not so much. I am under the belief that you probably cannot have enough defensive linemen in the NFL. You can always have more. And while Javon Hargrave was definitely out of position with the Minnesota Vikings, Jonathan Allen was not. And I liked the way he was utilized, and I thought he had success as the season went on, and his cap number was not as prohibitive as Javon Hargrave's for the 2026 season. Aaron Jones, completely understand. Love him as a locker room guy. Definitely on the wrong end of 30 in terms of how, running backs kind of fall off a cliff at this point, and does not justify the cap number he was going to play under in 2026. If they wanted to bring him back on a lighter number, sure, I'd be all for that. They also restructured Justin Jefferson and Christian Darrisaw's contracts to get a significant amount of cap space back. And then they also had TJ Hawkinson agree to a pay cut, with the idea and with the requirement being that he would then be able to hit free agency a year earlier. So instead of hitting it after the 2027 season, TJ Hawkinson will become a free agent at the end of 2026. And they also are apparently shopping Jonathan Grenard, which I hate. I think it's stupid. Jonathan Grenard wants a contract extension, and I agree it's a weird time for him to ask for one. I think the time to ask for a raise would have been after his first year with the team. I think it's weird in a year coming off of a lot of injuries for Jonathan Grenard. He got a lot of pressures, and the sack numbers definitely don't reflect that, because he only had 3, but he was getting to the quarterback a ton, just never able to finish once he did get there. But I think that it is weird a little bit to ask for a raise. I don't think I think he certainly deserves a raise. I don't think he's wrong for asking for one. I would say the timing coming after that season is a little bit weird, and apparently the Minnesota Vikings don't want to pay that, even though an extension and a raise could, in fact, clear up cap space for this offseason, actually, weirdly enough, just based on how all of the foolishness of it works. But I guess the Vikings don't want that for Jonathan Grenard, who, granted, has dealt with injuries kind of throughout his entire career. But at the same time, you have him under contract for 2 more years. Why do you need to trade him? If you get blown away, if Max Crosby's going for 2 firsts and you think you can get a first rounder, and that's not what they think they're getting. They expect to get a day 2 pick, and they're hoping that it's a second round pick. That doesn't blow me out of the water. That is not worth it at that point, because I think Jonathan Grenard's value as an edge rusher is big. And I get that you want to get Dallas Turner more playing time, but find ways to get all 3 of those guys on the field at the same time, like you did it points during this 2025 season, because Dallas Turner certainly has taken steps forward and deserves to be a starter on this defense, but I don't want it to be with Jonathan Grenard going elsewhere unless you think you can get a good pick for him that isn't just a day 2 pick with a day 3 pick. I would like it to be, hopefully, if it is a day 2 pick, early second round or late first round, which I think you could get like out of a team if the Eagles really wanted one. Wanted an edge rusher. I think Jonathan Grenard would make sense there, and they are not giving up a ton of draft capital. They are obviously giving up a little bit of draft capital, and maybe you can throw in one of your third-round picks. But that is what I want. That would be us throwing in one of the third-round picks. Minnesota Vikings throwing in a third-round pick to make it a little bit more digestible, or a fourth-round pick to make it a little bit more digestible for Philadelphia if they were if wanting and willing to give up the first-round pick. There's no indication that that is the case, but or any indication that they would actually be able to afford an extension. So maybe they're not the best example to use, but that is what I would want if I would be willing to part with Jonathan Grenard, because I think he still has value to this team, and I think by giving him a pay raise and an extension, you could spread out the cap a little bit more. And you might say, well, then you're pushing the cap down the line more. You're just doing what Rick Spielman did late in his tenure with the Minnesota Vikings, and that is you are taking the money from this year and piling it on to future years. And then you're going to do that, and you're going to pile it on even more into 2 years from now and 3 years from now. And then you're going to be at a point where you can't pile the money into the next pile, and now we're just broken for 2 or 3 years, and we can't sign any free agents, and we have to hope that we've drafted well. And usually, yeah, I would agree with that and say it would probably be smart to be thrifty, but the problem here is that when you are piling the money, once you get to 2029, you are throwing that money actually now into just the Grand Canyon of cap spaces, because the not-so-secret feeling around the league is that a huge TV deal, when the next opt-out for the NFL's TV deal is at the end of the decade, 2029, 2030, I believe. And the idea is the cap could perhaps double at that point. And then you're really, you're still obviously going to be on the hook, but now that cap number, the major cap number you get by pushing it down the road, is going to be relatively small, because the cap space now that each team will have has grown so exponentially at that point. And that's kind of what teams like what the Eagles are banking on. If you notice their contracts, curiously, all of the dead money cap hits all are in 2029, where they have a ton of money, where if this TV deal was not to happen, I don't see any reason why it wouldn't, like a big raise in the TV deal. But if it didn't, they would be screwed probably for the rest of their existence. So, I mean, you could hope for that, because the misfortune of Philadelphia Eagles fans, and by the way, Green Bay Packers are also banking on this with the big number hits for both Jordan Love and Micah Parsons in their contracts. We would love to see the misfortune of both Philadelphia and Green Bay, but I don't think that it is not going to happen. I think that a big TV contract is underway, is going to come our way in 2029, 2030, and that cap space is going to become significantly larger, and that means any future considerations that we push down the road now are going to be fairly meaningless once we get to that point. And you have now a runway of 2 to 3 years to continue to build that stockpile of future money, only to have it essentially disappear once that new TV contract hits. You could do that with Jonathan Grenard and keep him around. I don't understand why this team is shopping him. And, part of it is probably because, we don't have a general manager. Rob Brzezinski is the cap guy, and he's probably going to try to be as fiscally responsible as possible being that cap guy, but we don't have a guy with an overarching vision of this team. Kevin O'Connell is coaching for his job, perhaps. I guess I don't think so, but a lot of people do think so, that perhaps he is on the hot seat entering this year. I don't think so. I don't know why that would be the case, just a year and a half removed from doing what he did with Sam Darnold, transforming him from a broken quarterback to one that won the Super Bowl the year after he left the Kevin O'Connell School of Quarterback Training, and one that you've already invested heavily into J.J. McCarthy, and he's the guy that probably had the most say in bringing in J.J. McCarthy with that number 10 overall pick. So with all of that being said, I don't think that he is on the hot seat, but because a lot of people seem to think so, he might not be making the best decisions for the future of the Minnesota Vikings, but maybe making the more short-sighted decisions for the 2026 Minnesota Vikings. If we're still not sure about how this personnel structure goes for Minnesota without Kwesi Adofo-Mensah there and without a general manager there to take his place until after the draft occurs. So right now it is assumingly Kevin O'Connell, Brian Flores mostly making the personnel decisions, and then Rob Brzezinski kind of being like the accountant guy and saying no or yes, because we have this much money and this is how much the Wilfs are going to let us spend over the cap this year, and here's how much money that they're going to let us push down the road. So I think Brzezinski is still basically just handling the numbers, and I think that we don't have a guy with long-term vision handling the personnel. That's probably why Jonathan Grenard could be on the way out, because they want to add a big-time talent, and they want to bring in they want to have space to bring in some of the second-tier and third-tier free agents, which would be worse than Jonathan Grenard, by the way. The one guy they are bringing back, though, hold on. Before we go there, so just to recap, that was the moves that the Vikings have made to bring themselves $20 to $30 million under the cap, so that they have money to spend in free agency based on how they want to structure those contracts. And the first thing they did with that open space is they signed Eric Wilson to a 3-year deal worth $22.5 million. That was the day before free agency opened, but obviously with him being one of their players, they can negotiate with him throughout the course of the offseason before the legal tampering period opens up, and they took the opportunity to do that, and they rewarded him for what was a breakout season. And for me, I was, when he was first with the team, a huge Eric Wilson hater, I guess you would say, because what he did when he was with the team at first, I think 2020 was his last year, he made big splashy plays a couple of times during the course of the season. Like, he had 3 sacks and 3 interceptions, which is good, but it seemed like besides those 6 plays every year, every other play he was making a mistake at one point or another. He leaves the team, he goes on a sojourn, eventually finds his way to Green Bay after a couple of stops, and works with Jeff Hafley for a couple of seasons, who is a linebacker coaching guru in the same way that Kevin O'Connell is a quarterback coaching guru. And he becomes a well-rounded linebacker, and then Brian Flores takes his game to a whole nother level, and kind of, like in Toy Story 2, where Woody has a nightmare that Andy doesn't want to play with him anymore and throws him in the trash. That is kind of what Brian Flores did to Ivan Pace Jr. When he saw that Eric Wilson was a much cooler, much better, and more well-rounded option as that blitzing linebacker position, because Ivan Pace is good at blitzing. Ivan Pace is good against the run, but he is smaller than Eric Wilson. And we've seen times where even if he is getting to the running back is able to stop him and stonewall him. Jahmyr Gibbs is able to stonewall him. Jahmyr Gibbs was not able to stonewall Eric Wilson because he has the size advantage. So even though they both have similar skill sets, Eric Wilson is kind of like what happens when you give Captain America super serum. That's what happened. You gave Ivan Pace super serum, he turns into Eric Wilson. Both are bad against the pass. Both really have trouble getting into the right zones and matching coverage well. But both of them are very, very good instinctually against the run, and when blitzing, it's just Eric Wilson has the physical tools to be better than Ivan Pace Jr. They still brought back Ivan Pace Jr. on a RFA tender, so he'll still be there as depth and to spell Eric Wilson, but I think Eric Wilson, by and large, has now taken that starting job. I think both guys are from Cincinnati, if I'm not mistaken. Both Pace and Eric Wilson obviously didn't play together at the same time, but it's kind of funny how they both fit that same sort of mold, and they both went to the same college. I still would like Minnesota to bring in a second linebacker, because Blake Cashman is good against the pass, but they also like now to what Brian Flores was doing a lot at the end of the season was these linebacker blitzes, the cross-dog blitzes, where if you are in one gap, that you have 2 linebackers who go in the double A gap, which is each gap surrounding the center. So one linebacker on one of his shoulders, the other linebacker on the other. And then when the ball is snapped, they kind of fade back, but also cross over to each other's gaps. so that now you're putting confusion on the center as to who he needs to block, and the guard as to who he needs to block, and the running back has to now stay in, and that's why Minnesota was able to have success against Detroit a lot in this season, because they forced Jahmyr Gibbs not to go out into the passing lane, and because Eric Wilson was better at attacking the running back protector than Ivan Pace was, because he has the size advantage once again, Eric Wilson was able to completely obliterate Jahmyr Gibbs time and time again, and so it turned what was a strength, having a receiving back, into something they couldn't even utilize, the Lions. And because he was so bad at pass protecting, it made him a liability to be out there, but they didn't have any other options on those passing downs. So that's what Eric Wilson provides, but I would also like to get a linebacker that can be a guy that you feel comfortable putting back in those passing zones, in those underneath zones, in those hook curl zones. And I have a guy that I have an idea for, and we'll get to that later on. So that was the first big signing that Minnesota made, and that was before free agency started on Monday. It was actually on Sunday night, late Sunday night. And then Monday starts, and we see a lot of players being signed to a lot of different teams, but none of those teams are purple and gold with Helga horns on their logo, unfortunately, until we got one. It's like you're going fishing, and it's just a bad day at the lake until James Pierre bites on that hook and becomes a Minnesota Viking. And I don't know a whole lot of James Pierre. Like, I saw the chart that was making waves on Sunday that showed that both Pierre and, interestingly enough, Fabian Moreau were some of the best cornerbacks in coverage. If you just look at the statistics, like, they gave up the lowest completion percentages and the lowest passer rating. So I had become familiar of him by that only the day before, and was like, okay, that'd be interesting. But also, if Fabian Moreau's there, how reliable is this metric? Because I don't remember Fabian Moreau being a guy that was shutting down wide receivers. I don't remember him making any huge mistakes either, but I don't remember him being this like top of the line cornerback that this chart would make him out to be. And granted, James Pierre also had a small sample size with Pittsburgh, but I was able to watch a lot of his tape today after he signed with the Minnesota Vikings. And I am intrigued. And it's kind of following the same similar storyline as to when the Vikings signed Isaiah Rodgers last year, because at first I was like, ooh, I don't really like Isaiah Rodgers. And then you watch the film and it's like, oh, he actually fits this system perfectly and is never going to let anyone get behind him, I guess, except for A.J. Brown on a double move when it matters the most. But for James Pierre, he is a cornerback that there is a lot to like. There's a few things that I don't like, but there is a lot to like, and I'll tell them to you now. He is very, very good playing off coverage, and he played in a very similar system in Pittsburgh that Minnesota runs, with a two-high safety system, split field coverage, which involves a lot of communication, and I saw James Pierre on the film being the alpha in a lot of these communications on his side of the field with the other defensive backs when a motion came his way, so making sure that his side of the field was not going to get crossed up, and even mid-route pointing out different receivers and seeing crossers coming and saying, okay, you take him and I'll take him, just with the wave of a finger, and doing all of that and still being able to come up and make a play and get to his right spot, like doing all this seamlessly. And I think that is going to work wonders for a split field system that is run very similar to Pittsburgh that we run here in Minnesota with our coverages. And then obviously you don't have to cover as long typically with the Vikings, because even though there might be fewer defensive backs or fewer guys in coverage, you're usually getting to the quarterback pretty quick with your blitzes. He was strictly an outside cornerback. He's about 6'2", and he's long. He's got long arms. And what makes him so good in off-ball coverage is he's both able to keep his eyes kind of hinged both on the receiver. He knows when to pass him off if he's in a match zone, but also at the same time keeping his eyes on the quarterback, like as if he is a chameleon with eyes going in different directions. And not only that, there were a lot of times on film where I was like, oh, he's not in a good position when this receiver made this break. And a lot of that was on curl routes. And when I was watching Isaiah Rodgers last year, that was kind of his weakness on film. After this is when I was watching his Eagles film after the Minnesota Vikings had signed him at this time last year, not from what I saw on film when he was with the Vikings last season, but while he was with the Eagles in that final run, is he was really good at not letting anything get over the top, was Isaiah Rodgers. But he was susceptible a little bit to the comeback routes, the curl routes, and any quick things over the middle. He would have a little bit more time keeping up with the receiver horizontally than he would vertically if he was in man-to-man coverage. And if there were completions against Isaiah Rodgers on those film, it would be on those comeback routes because he left too much space. And I was seeing a lot of that same space, maybe to a lesser extent, left by James Pierre. And each time I'm thinking, oh, this is just another Isaiah Rodgers, but not as fast and older and maybe not as good. But the way he closes on the football and plays the football is incredible. He knows the exact time to break on the ball. And I don't know if he's baiting the quarterback to throw it or if his instincts are just that good, but he drives on the football and kind of knows where he needs to be, knows how far away from the receiver he can afford to be in off coverage so that he is not letting up too big of a cushion on a hook or a curl or a comeback, but also so that he's not being beat like on a double move or just a pure speed route down the field. James Pierre is excellent at reading the break and timing his release from coverage to the ball at the exact moment that the quarterback makes his decision to throw to that player. So he breaks on the ball well. He has great communication. He obviously has the long cornerback body that you like with your prototype cornerbacks. Playing in a very similar system in Pittsburgh that he will be playing in Minnesota. And another thing I noticed on film is when he was in man-to-man coverage a lot of the time and a guy maybe got 6-7 yards down the field, it was an interesting technique that he used, which I thought at first might be a little bit of a hindrance to him. And that is, if he is in man-to-man coverage and that receiver is running a vertical route or anything deeper than 7 yards, he will turn his hips to the sideline and he will basically make sure that he has all of the leverage to the outside. And a lot of times that would leave him a little bit more vulnerable to the inside. If the wide receiver were to cut to the inside, and at times they did, and they were able to get open. But then I realized that, this is because he has a super good understanding of the coverage that his teammates are playing as well. He knows the responsibilities not only of himself, but also of his teammates. And a lot of times it was, that's because there's a robber coming down to poach off this crossing route if he goes to the inside. So I don't need to even put my hips that way because the only thing I'm really truly responsible for is anything down the sideline because I know my teammates will have my back if this guy is able to cross my face and get to the inside. I don't have to worry about that. So he came off to me on film as a very instinctual player that has good traits and also is very headsy and has a good football IQ, at least a good coverage IQ. He also excels in contested catch situations. I saw him against Alec Pierce prevent Alec Pierce from making the types of plays that Alec Pierce has made consistently throughout the last 2 years. And shut down a fade route when they were playing the Colts last year. Didn't even give Daniel Jones that option. He looked to Alec Pierce, and James Pierre was completely covering him. And I don't think we've had a good cornerback with that size that can play sticky coverage, play different types of coverage since Xavier Rhodes was here. So I'm very excited to see what James Pierre is able to do with Minnesota. And he's also a better tackler, I think, than Isaiah Rodgers. And obviously Isaiah Rodgers is still on the team. And I think both of those guys are going to be your outside corners with Byron Murphy playing more nickel. And I think in the Vikings nickel, whereas in the past it's been 3 safeties, especially when we had Cam Bynum with Metellus being the nickel player, I think Metellus is going to play more of a box safety role, and our nickel packages are going to be more 3 corners, 2 safeties. And that Byron Murphy will more often than not be that slot corner, and that James Pierre and Isaiah Rodgers will be on the outside. And I also think this opens up a possibility that Jermon McCoy, if we're drafting here moving forward, is completely off the table because he plays that sort of man-to-man sticky coverage on the outside That is now taken up by James Pierre and Isaiah Rodgers, who are both very, very capable, and that Brian Flores, I think, likes a lot. And then either kind of telegraphs to me that we're either going for Avion Terrell or Dylan Thieneman in this draft. I think that, especially unless like Jeremiah Love or someone falls that you didn't expect to get to 18, or if you like trade up for Caleb Downs, if we stay at 18 and Thieneman or Terrell are there, I would assume those are the two guys that it's going to come down to for Flores, for O'Connell, and for Rob Brzezinski come draft day next month. And those are both very good prospects to be excited about. The only cons really with James Pierre that I saw was he is obviously, he's 29, going to be 30. And with any football player at any position except for like quarterback, punter, and kicker, you got to be careful when those guys get to this age because, like, especially in Pierre's case, if he loses a step, well, now those cushions that he gives purposefully are not going to be enough. He needs to give a greater cushion because he might not be able to catch up to a receiver if he's lost a step. And he might be a step slow to break on a route. And now all of these routes that he is kind of easily breaking up because he breaks so well in the football now are turning into 10-yard completions. And I think we kind of saw that at the end of Stephon Gilmore's career when he was with the Vikings, is a lot of those plays that he was smart. He knew where to be, but he just could not drive on the football when that player kind of stopped short within his zone. And he offered way too big of a cushion, and that allowed a lot of these deep comeback routes to be completed against the Vikings defense when Stephon Gilmore was there. So you have to worry about if age becomes an issue, and I'm not saying it will during his 2-year deal, but I'm saying that each year the chance that it does becomes a little bit greater. So that is one worry. The other thing is he's not great in press man coverage. He's fine, but he oftentimes can get kind of aggressive on the first move. So any double moves, he becomes a little bit more susceptible. And he's also, like I said, vulnerable middle of the field. Even when in the times when he is still torquing his hips to the outside, there are times where he did not have the help that he was expecting. And that allowed some open windows. Sometimes they were seen, sometimes they weren't by the quarterback, but it allowed some big open windows over the middle of the field. So I think he is a little bit susceptible to that as well. But those are the only cons. I think more so than not, that this is a very good signing for the Minnesota Vikings. And I think James Pierre is more than a depth guy. I think he's going to be like an instant starter for Minnesota, and he's going to be a lot of fun to watch. Because last year they brought in Isaiah Rodgers as their shorter, athletic cornerback, and then they brought Jeff Okudah as their long, physical cornerback. And Jeff Okudah obviously got injured and was out for most of the season, but I think you kind of combine both of those. Obviously, James Pierre doesn't have the same speed as Isaiah Rodgers, but he is a good version of Jeff Okudah, kind of what you were hoping you could get out of Jeff Okudah when you signed him to a small deal in last offseason. And also not as physical. Like Jeff Okudah probably had a tendency to get called for more holds. I don't see James Pierre in what I've seen. And last year was only 239 pass coverage snaps. So it was a smaller sample size, but I didn't see him get handsy like Okudah would. He didn't have to rely on physicality because he played the ball well and because he was so good playing off the ball. He puts up elite numbers. Like the film doesn't lie, and then the metrics on like PFF from this last year confirm it. He is ranked as the number 1 cornerback. He is ranked number 2 coverage cornerback. He's a good tackler. He struggles a little bit against the run, but not more so than I would say about average for a cornerback, for an outside cornerback. I don't think he's significantly worse or significantly better than any other outside cornerback. So the metrics match, the film matches. He's only got a few problems. This is going to be an impact player for Minnesota that certainly helps their secondary. And then last but not least, I think we were all expecting Kyler Murray to be in purple on day 1, and that has not been the case. I'm fine with bringing in Kyler Murray as long as it is a true competition with JJ McCarthy, because I think McCarthy still has a lot more upside. I am also more of a McCarthy truther, I guess, than a lot of other people, and I kind of view last year as, okay, he played 2 games, then 3 games, or then 4 games, separated by injury. His first 2 games are games in which are his first NFL games, first of all, and also his first games back from his first real injury of his career, in which he had missed an entire season from the previous year. So getting his feet wet. And then the 4 games, one of them was actually good against Detroit, or at least decent against Detroit, and they won that game. And then he had some problems with his accuracy. But again, that was perhaps could be attributed to the injury and not being able to fully commit to fixing his footwork throughout the course of the season because he has a bum ankle. And then after into his third stint, he really looks good as the quarterback for Minnesota and starts to and yeah, they took out some of the plays of the offense and they took off more middle of the field throws, but I think that's being kind of overblown a little bit. Bo Nix has been in an offense that has taken so much off of his plate the last 2 years, and that team made it to an AFC Championship game. And I think J.J. McCarthy has better tools than Bo Nix. It's about him finding better mechanics. And Bo Nix doesn't have good mechanics. He has good mechanics at times, and then they're kind of all over the place. He has inconsistent mechanics. J.J. McCarthy's are consistently pretty bad, but I think J.J. McCarthy can pretty easily be a better option than Bo Nix. Like, I still feel that way. And Bo Nix was a guy that they needed to kind of ease into the offense. I think they probably should have had J.J. McCarthy ease into the offense and not put everything on his plate at once and kind of slowly put it on his plate as the season went on. But I think they gave him too much early on in the season. It overwhelmed him a little bit, so they had to take it off. And so we are seeing in the last part of the season what the first part of the season should have been for J.J. McCarthy. But his last 4 games, he was playing at a level that EPA per dropback wise, he put up 3 games that were higher than any game Drake May had during his rookie season. And we all saw during Drake May's rookie season that there was some promise there. But J.J. McCarthy had 3 EPA per dropback games that were higher than anything Drake May did during his rookie season. So those heights are there with McCarthy. And it's a guy that has played 10 games. So I think a lot of the kind of doomers are being a little bit ignorant and a bit too reactive and not predictive, because I think there's hope for J.J. McCarthy. So all that to say, if Kyler Murray is the guy, I do worry about the injuries, I should say. So that is why I want like a Kyler Murray or a Geno Smith. And I want it to be a true competition. I don't want it to be just like this symbolic competition that we all know Kyler is going to win or Geno's going to win, or that everything is heavily weighted to the veteran winning and that it's kind of just like a competition to save face as an organization, with while also kind of silently admitting that McCarthy was a failure. If that is the direction that this team is going, I think it is a poor direction, because I think there's a lot more to be gained long term from J.J. McCarthy than there is from either Kyler Murray or Geno Smith. But maybe that is the holdup. Maybe Kyler Murray wants to be the guaranteed starter heading into 2026. And if there is a competition, it's not really a competition. It's a rigged system or whatever. I wouldn't want any part of that. I would prefer to then just get a capable veteran backup that is better than Carson Wentz, and that can still compete with J.J. McCarthy, but that I think J.J. McCarthy would be clearly better than. But we will see if Kyler Murray ends up coming to Minnesota or not here on day 2 of free agency. I've gotten a couple of my wish list checked off. I wanted Monteric Brown. He went with the Jaguars. I think actually looking back at it, James Pierre is a better cornerback than Monteric Brown. I have updated my wish list. I also had Eric Wilson on my wish list. Some guys that were taken off of my wish list because they were signed by other teams include Kenneth Gainwell as a running back too, as well as Kobe Bryant as a safety. There were a number of others. I think there are 4 or 5 guys that I had on my list, including Sheldon Rankin as well, the defensive tackle. So I've updated my wish list for free agency, guys that I hope Minnesota signs between now and whenever these guys sign. I mean, preferably Friday, so that I can, be confident in the direction of this team and have a good idea of where they're going. But quarterback, either Kyler Murray or Geno Smith would be ideal. Running back, I would like to have Najee Harris, a decent pass protector, a decent receiving back, could form a good 1-2 punch with Jordan Mason. He could be your third down back, or he could just be kind of like what we did last year, just split time between Najee Harris and Jordan Mason, like we did with Aaron Jones and Jordan Mason. And I think Najee Harris is going to be a little bit cheaper than Aaron Jones, especially coming off the injury. Wide receiver, Greg Dortch is the guy that I would like them to get as a slot receiver. So you have Addison and Jefferson as guys that are really smooth with the routes and that can get both down the field intermediately and deep and get open in both of those planes of the field. But also a guy that is quick twitch off the line. Greg Dortch would fill that role. A center, I really wanted Tyler Linderbaum, and I think there was a way for the Vikings to structure a contract similar to the way that the Raiders constructed their contract when they ultimately won the Linderbaum sweepstakes that would have kept Minnesota still in a healthy cap space for the 2026 season. That didn't happen, so I would like Elton Jenkins, who was just released by the Green Bay Packers. He is not only a good center, but he has played guard, he has played tackle. He's like the guy for the former Duke guy, Graham Barton, for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They're going to put him at center, but if somebody gets injured, like they did at the beginning of the season, he can move to right tackle. He can move to right guard and can be your best option there. He is like a swing man that already has a starting position, but can be wherever he most needs. Like if you don't trust Blake Brandel to be a left tackle, if Christian Darrisaw suffers another big injury, and you have more faith in Blake Brandel as your center, you can swing Elton Jenkins out to the left tackle for the rest of the season. Something like that. So Elton Jenkins brings the versatility, and he is good all along the offensive line. Two defensive tackles that I'd like. Like I said, I think you can never go broke with too many defensive tackles, and I think both of these guys would fill similar roles to Hargrave and Allen and be a bit cheaper. One of them would be Calais Campbell as kind of that 3-technique defensive tackle, and then DJ Reader as the true nose that Minnesota lacked all season last year. He is excellent against the run, a big body, something we missed in Harrison Phillips. I would like to see DJ Reader and Calais Campbell. Leo Chenal is a linebacker that I'd like. Like I said, we have 3 starting caliber linebackers for 2 spots already, but I would just like to rotate more guys in and have Leo Chenal as a guy that is the most versatile out of all of them. He plays the run well, he can pass rush well, and he also drops back into coverage well. And then Jalen Hawkins is still on the market, and he was one of the higher graded safeties by PFF. I'll admit I have not watched a ton of his film yet, so I am banking a lot on what the PFF film watchers have said. I will watch some film maybe tonight or tomorrow and come to a different opinion, but right now I'm putting Jalen Hawkins, the former Patriots free safety, on my wish list. You can have Hawkins as the free safety, assuming Harrison Smith retires. Still, that has not been confirmed one way or another. And then you can have Metellus as your box safety and allow Theo Jackson and Jay Ward to be where they are at their best as depth guys and not on the field as much and more on the sideline. So that is my wish list. Either Kyler Murray or Geno Smith, Najee Harris, Greg Dortch, Elton Jenkins, Calais Campbell, DJ Reader, Leo Chenal, and Jalen Hawkins. We will see if we get any of those 8 guys when we return for another show, which will be back tomorrow. We're going to have 3 shows this week, one after Monday, one after Tuesday, one after Wednesday, and hopefully we have some more free agents to talk about when we return here tomorrow night at this same time. We hope you had a great time listening. Hope you learned a lot. And we will see you tomorrow. This has been the Vibe of the Vikings.